In 2014, about 10 years ago, my esteemed and respected brother, Tom Holland, approached me about us doing a podcast, an audio message that he wanted to send to as many as he could. He referred to it as Standing Up for America. And while it was certainly important, very relevant, urgently needed at that time, even now 10 years later, the message is even more important. We're going to pause from doing the Tom's Pastime Porch for a few weeks, and I would like to encourage you to listen to the audio message of Brother Tom Holland as he speaks about America, the love that he had for this country. He's already gone on to meet his reward, but he loved America passionately. And the research and the thoughts that he presented are worthy of our time. And now, Brother Tom Holland about America.
This is Tom Holland speaking for the good people of America, and that's for the good of all Americans. If all one does today is rely on the distortions and exaggerations of the bullies in the liberal, I'm talking about the big three TV networks and the big bully boys who control them, that person might conclude that the big boys with their propaganda programs have the day. But let us consider some reasons to determine anew to take our country back from the no-God, secular specialists, and the materialistic monsters and the homosexual activists. It's time to take our country back. First, we have them outnumbered. If less than 3% of the U.S. population is homosexual, why should we despair, even though the big three bully TV networks are allied with those who have led in an effort to radically change this great nation with what has been identified as a sexual revolution? The majority of Americans go about their business in the factories, in the offices, in places of business, on the farms, in the schools, in homeschooling, and in other worthwhile endeavors. However, when push comes to shove, the true American spirit will show itself. The media and the homosexuals and the atheist bullies are vastly outnumbered. A general during the U.S. Civil War supposedly gave the military strategy for winning a battle. He said, quote, "You get there to the battlefield first with the most men." Well, in this cultural war, we have the most people. Next, the miserable failure of the bully boys with their boycotts. On another broadcast, I mentioned the efforts of the bullies to boycott Chick-fil-A. Talk about a colossal failure. People responded to the bullies by going to Chick-fil-A restaurants. In fact, there were Chick-fil-A restaurants who had so much business they ran out of food. Did the bully boys get the message? Probably not. But during that so-called boycott of Chick-fil-A restaurants, I saw a most impressive line of cars at a Chick-fil-A restaurant in Alabama. I'm telling you, they were lined up to give Chick-fil-A business. They were not bowing down to the boycott bullies. Studies have shown that bullies are basically insecure people. The more the bullies, including the media, boycott, the more true American people are urged into action. Next, consider how the bullies succeeded in getting politicians to modify the Religious Freedom Act in Indiana, which the Indiana legislature had passed. But during that fight, some unknown TV reporter from a relatively unknown TV station did a setup job on some hard-working pizza restaurant owners. The business was known as Memories Pizza. The little reporter got the owner to admit that her conscience or his conscience would not permit the owner from making pizza for, if I remember, a wedding party, for a gay wedding. So here came the big bullies to rally the troops, to make a show out of boycotting and closing that restaurant. Oh, and this little unknown reporter is going to have national news now. She is going to be put on the national scene. Well, you got to admire audacity. The response of real Americans was to set up a fund to help those embattled Memories Pizza people, the hard-working Americans who happen to have some conviction for which they would not stand and be bullied. They started a fund. The real Americans responded by giving money to the embattled people of that Memories Pizza. In one day, $200,000 was given, and soon over $800,000 was given. So when the bullies push us, we'll push back. And don't forget two things. Bullies are insecure, and two, we've got them vastly outnumbered. And so all of a sudden, what they were going to do to destroy a business because they were, quote, prejudiced against homosexuals, all of a sudden, this business commenced to be able to have a situation, have a business that they had never had so far as the place to have their business, because these great, true American people were tired of being bullied. And so when you think about how we are outnumbering them, and we are seeing more and more Americans that are sick and tired of being pushed around and bullied by these people. They've had their day and they've had their say, but the time may be running out on them. There is another example of how when people stand up against these bullies, the bullies tend to lose out. I'm going to be talking now, and I'm relying on David French. David French is a graduate of Harvard Law School. He taught at Cornell Law School, and a speech that he made, which was mailed out to over 2,900,000 readers by Imprimis magazine. He made this speech in Washington, April the 21st, 2015, and I am very glad to acknowledge information that I'm using, some of which came from the research of David French. And he talks about the effort to pressure Hobby Lobby and how that failed. Customers were either supporters of the owners or indifferent to politics, and boycotts had no effect on Hobby Lobby's bottom line or its willingness to fight. Thanks be to the good people at Hobby Lobby who were willing to stand up and be counted and stand for what has made America great and the freedom to practice their business as they chose without a bunch of evidently not very hard-working people going to put pressure on them and maybe even destroy their business. Then think about what happened, and again I'm appealing to information from David French. Think what happened in Houston. The leftist government officials were forced to backtrack within days after issuing subpoenas requiring area pastors to turn over the contents of their sermons and other communications. The public outcry was so swift and so great that the city capitulated even before a judge could rule on motions to squash. So you think in terms of when people really stand up against the bullies. Now, I'm going to quote this statement from David French. He says, the message is clear from these examples of people who had the intestinal fortitude, or as the uncouth might call it, the guts, to stand up against these bullies. French says, quoting him, the message was clear. Cultural conservatives are not, in fact, culturally isolated, but rather have the support of millions of Americans who oppose leftist bullying. End of quote. So I haven't invented this identification of these people who are bullies. Other people certainly not only recognize the bullying that's going on and has gone on, but they are willing to stand up and identify it for what it really, really is. May God bless America with Americans who love this land and who are not going to sit idly by while a bunch of pagans are going to try to take it over and control it. They failed miserably back in the 60s and 70s when they were going to take it over with communism. They had the professors planted in the universities. They had the rabble rousers out on university campuses, and they had them set up. And so I heard their speeches, and they all basically had one theme. And this is a quote from some of them. We're not going to shake this society. We're going to break it. End of quote. When they were asked, well, if you do, what are you going to put in its place? The stock answer was, quote, we don't know, but it'll be better than what we've got, end of quote. They were expecting intelligent people to buy that kind of information. Oh, they knew what they were going to put on its place. They already had it all set up. But the communists in this land discovered something. There are too many Americans that love this country, and they love our freedom. And they're not going to sit idly by and watch a bunch of pagans, no-God people, and communism was based on a no-God philosophy. And as Lenin, one of the great leaders, I should not have used the word great, one of the leaders said, quote, religion is the opiate of the people. Well, there were too many people in America that believe in God to sit idly by and let these people control it. And it's time, folks, not to want our country back. It's time to take it back. And we're going to be working on a 10-point program to take this land back to what it once was, one nation under God with liberty and justice for all. God bless America.
Awesome.
Same Publications appreciates your being with us today and listening or watching this material. Be glad to help you in any way in the future.